Give me a minute. I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is my Deconstructing Project 2025 project. I'm working my way through the book, and this video is about the foreword. Now, right, the foreword. We're just at the foreword. We're just at the beginning of this process. And I had thought that the foreword would be a single video. It's only about 24 pages. It takes us to page 62 of the book. But the reality is that in the foreword, after a short history lesson in the Heritage Foundation and its role in American conservative politics, which I may do a separate video on, the book gets into what it calls the four fronts that will decide America's future. And they call them fronts because for these folks, they're in a war. They're in a war to determine what vision of America's future actually has a chance to survive in the world. This is an existential struggle. Now, again, I had intended to do a single video on the foreword, but the fact is that these four fronts represent the broad strokes of the underpinnings of the Project 2025 project. And so I think that it's important to look at each of them in turn because if I tried to do all of them, we're looking at an hour and a half probably of discussion on these. And I don't want to short shrift any of it because I think it's really important. So in the first front that we'll look at in this video, what the conservative action committees are concerned about is restoring the American family as the centerpiece of American life and protecting children. Won't somebody please think of the children? From there, in the next video, we'll look at dismantling the administrative state and the return of self-governance to the American people, defending our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats, and securing our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls the blessings of liberty. Now, again, I had thought that the foreword would be a single video. It's not going to be. It's probably going to be 5 videos. We'll look at each one of these 4 fronts and what the Project 2025 authors say about them, and then compare that to what we know is actually happening in reality. And we'll start with restoring the family as the centerpiece of American life and protecting our children. Now, what assumptions? Because virtually nobody would argue with this statement, right? I mean, the reality is that the vast bulk of people choose to be in monogamous heterosexual relationships and have children. That's one of the cornerstones of our economic system. That's how we breed generational wealth. It's how the greatest engine for generating wealth in the history of the human race has added something like $10,000 per capita wealth to the American people in the last 100 years while trebling the population. That's a huge accomplishment. Um, and the cornerstone of that life is the American family. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So, on its surface, and of course, nobody's going to disagree with protecting our children. So, on its surface, this appears to be a very reasonable goal that any reasonable person would embrace. But let's take a look at what informs this goal, of what thinking goes into the actions that these folks want to take in order to preserve this goal. So these bullet points concerning the restoration of the family as the centerpiece of American life are all direct quotes taken from the foreword. Let's take a look at them. The first point that the authors make is that in many ways, the entire point of centralizing political power is to subvert the family. That statement is so far removed from reality that I don't even know where to begin with it. Imagine the paranoid, delusional world you have to live in to think that that is true. The vast bulk of the federal government is committed to preserving and serving the American family. From a strong armed forces that protect us in our sleep, to governmental programs like the Department of Education that make sure that your children are educated so that I don't have to live next to idiots. The entire structure of our political life, from the PTA on up, is about the American family. And you're telling me that you think that all of government is out to subvert it. I think that that's crazy. I think it's crazy talk. And I think it belies a kind of victimhood of the white Christian nationalist who feels he's under attack. And he should feel like he's under attack because the things he believes are not American principles. And they need to be purged from the society. And this paranoia about government is the first of them. The authors write, fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide, substance abuse, rejection of the church, and high school dropouts. Now, I am not a social scientist. I don't, this seems a bit overstated to me. But my first question is, what are the causes of fatherlessness? What are the causes? Could a school to prison pipeline system that keeps men locked up, especially men from the especially people of color, men of color, especially from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, who were imprisoned on low grade marijuana charges and then ended up in a cycle, a systemic cycle of being picked up, put back in, picked up, put back in. Meanwhile, John Boehner just cashed the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, who was a vocal opponent of the legalization of marijuana for 30 years of his political career. He just cashed in $300 million for selling his marijuana business to the Canadians. How many people in Kentucky are still in jail on marijuana charges while John Boehner's cashing his 9-figure check? It's obscene. It's obscene. And it's one of the leading causes of fatherlessness in this country. You know what another one is? A lack of access to reproductive health care. That's another cause of fatherlessness in this country. And this notion of principal sources of American poverty, while it's true, right, there is a connection between the two. I would argue that we know what the cure for poverty is. And simply put, it is the empowerment of women. When you give women the opportunity to decide when and with whom they're going to have kids, you raise the whole level of the society. Education, healthcare, all of it gets better when women are not chained to the biological imperative that much of culture and religion keeps them chained to. The endless cycle of menses, ovulation, pregnancy, lactation, again and again and again. We've solved the biology question. To turn our backs on that and to deny half the population their health care is about the most un-American thing that I can think of, to take away rights from half the population. Now, this next, really ignorant and hate-filled rant Taking back the government is kind of the chapter heading here. And this starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, SOGI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender equality, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used for what? To deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. Is this the most hypocritical and insane thing you have ever read in your life? We will make these words illegal because these words are a violation of the First Amendment, the right to free speech. What? What? Uh, and then, in what world, in a world where you are supposed to, just the baseline for being an American, you agree that all people are created equal, you're going to strike the words diversity, equity, and inclusion? Are you kidding me? What this does, what all this right here does, is it denies the very existence of anybody who isn't a white Christian national and that holds these religious beliefs. That it denies their existence and it denies their right to participate in our democracy. That right there should piss off every American that breathes because it's obscene and it's a violation of everything that we're supposed to believe in. This next point just made me absolutely crazy. Schools serve parents, not the other way around. Bullshit. Schools do not exist to serve parents. Schools exist to serve the children, to protect the children from the muddled, antiquated notions of their parents. Parents want to teach their kids that the world is flat. Fine, they can do it in the privacy of their homes. But don't bring it into the classroom. I want, when the neighbor's kids grow up, I want them to know the earth is round. I want them to know it's more than 6,000 years old. I want them to believe that we are in the midst of a climate crisis because we fucking are. I don't need somebody teaching their children that the world is only 6,000 years old, something we can disprove by taking a core sample from a fucking redwood. I, I, I don't want that ignorance breeding from generation to generation. I want schools that serve the children, that free them from the lies and ignorance that they're being taught at home, that usher them into the world of consensus, the world of science that we live in. Okay. Now, this next bit here, I really don't even know. So take a look at it with me. The sentence reads, the noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country. Now, you see what the problem with that statement is, right? Neither of those things are taught in any public high school in the country or school in the country. They're not. Those are graduate level notions that are taught in college. Those are optional classes, right? Those are electives, or they may be part of a course study, but they're not. They're not being taught in the schools. Now, how do you respond to somebody who insists that something is true that is not? I mean, how do you come to a common understanding with that person? This next point is like a knife in my heart. It's literally like a knife in my heart. Allowing parents or physicians to reassign the sex of a minor is child abuse and must end. Now, can you imagine that your wife suffered a particular protein enzyme uh, uh, shortage in pregnancy, and you had what everybody thought was a healthy baby girl? And then it turned out that, in fact, your wife had suffered this enzyme shortage during pregnancy. And you actually have a little boy, but that little boy's penis and testicles will not develop until they hit puberty. But she's a he. Can you imagine, as a parent, not being able to do anything about that? The powerlessness. What is your child going to suffer in the world because of this? And now you're telling me the government is inserting itself in the conversation I'm having with my wife and my doctor to say that we can't affirm, we know that in 12 years' time, this child is going to grow a penis and balls. That's a biological reality for this child. We can't give gender affirming care to this child. We can't say, we know it looks like you're a girl right now, but you're going to be a boy. So we're going to treat you like a boy. I think it's obscene. That kind of private pain inside a family and the challenges of dealing with such a situation are none of anybody's business. It's none of anybody's business. Leave it alone. Finally, conservatives should gratefully celebrate the greatest pro-family win in a generation, overturning Roe v. Wade. A decision that for 5 decades made a mockery of our Constitution and facilitated the deaths of tens of millions of unborn children. And then here's the really scary, like if that wasn't really the worst thing you've ever read, the celebration of the stripping of rights and bodily autonomy from 52% of the American people. A Supreme Court decision that has directly led to a 23% increase in deaths from birth defects, from women who are being made to bear unviable pregnancies to term and then go through the agonizing process of birthing a dead fetus. That's in Texas. As of the filming of this, July 24th, 2024, the rates of deaths from birth defects in Texas has risen 23% under their new, basically outlawed abortion ban. But as if all of that was not scary enough, we get this terrifying sentence at the end. But the Dobbs decision is just the beginning. They intend a national abortion ban. They intend a national ban on contraceptives. They intend a national ban on IVF. They want to take it all away. In summary, the next president has a moral responsibility to lead the nation in restoring a culture of life in America again. And I couldn't agree more with that statement. I just disagree with what a culture of life is. For me, a culture of life celebrates all people. It accepts them as they are. And it doesn't impose my vision of what it means to be a person on them. There is room in our world for everybody. not just the people like us. And I do think that the President of the United States has a moral responsibility to lead the nation in restoring a culture that values all life. In summary, when I look at this tenant, this front that the right is attacking on, what I see is a doctrine based on fear, ignorance, and hatred of the other, of anyone who isn't like me. It is a doctrine that preferences 19th century religious beliefs over 21st century science and reason, and the sacred relationship between doctors and their patients. It is a fundamentally flawed anti-American notion of social exclusion, even genocide, in the denial of the existence of trans people. It is based on outright lies, like the idea that critical race theory is taught in our schools when it is not. And it is based on dangerous authoritarian ideas that actually insert government into the family rather than excise it. This is the first pillar of Project 2025. There are 3 other pillars. All of this I find to be extremely dangerous, extremely disconcerting. And I think that we should all pay attention to this and understand that voting Republican in the fall is voting for this. I mean, unless you're a person who believes these awful, terrible things and therefore can't really call yourself an American, every American should vote against this fall. This is the foreword. Again, we're just at the very beginning of this exploration of this document. This is just point 1, front 1 from the foreword. In the next video, we'll take a look at front 2, dismantling the government. Thank you.